Week 4, episode 4 of See You at Mike's. I'm Trevor, but my friends call me Trevor.
I'm Tyler Swalowski.
What do your friends call you?
My friends call me SWAT.
And I'm Prem, but my friends call me Prem.
This is true.
Wow, that's a throwback right there.
For now. Deep cut. You'll have to listen to episode 3 to understand that one.
Do you, before we get anything,
Yep.
are you starting your transition into Prem?
I'm still thinking about it, and I've been saying that for the past 2 months. So I think I just need to decide that I'm doing it. But maybe I don't care. Maybe what's pronunciation after all? Isn't that arbitrary? I mean, not that arbitrary, but
A little bit. Prem is a little bit cooler than Prem. Maybe.
I
that
think
is
it's
true.
just
Also, it's easier. Honestly, frankly, I will say Prem would probably be easier to get people to like in a crowded space to get, because Prem kind of because it's more not softer, but just the sounds are less contrasting in a way.
Yeah, and it sounds like
You can mishear you
could
you
be
can
anything.
mishear it easier. But Prem is a very
Prem!
sharp sound. So it's harder to mishear because your ears kind of perk up, and then it revisits that memory in your brain that you heard 2 seconds ago of the name, and you're like, oh, he said Prem, and not Krem or Brem, which sometimes people
Krem.
apparently, yeah. So maybe it's the move after all.
I think that you should just go by Prem, but replace the vowel in the middle with whatever you want. Any vowel. You'd be like Prum.
Maybe
Prem.
depending on the day, even just my
Yeah.
mood.
Roll
I'm
a
feeling like-
7-sided dice.
Mm.
Is that how many
Yeah,
vowels
that's-
there are? A, E, I, O, U?
There's
And sometimes
five,
Y.
but there's,
And sometimes Y. Roll a 6-sided die.
but there's different pronunciations for each vowel too.
Yeah.
Oh,
You do Pram or
So it would have to be
Pram.
a whatever you call an 18-sided die.
D18.
A D18 die. Oh wait, no. Did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You caught up.
Wait. Yeah. Well, a D18.
And you just go by Orem.
Or Orem, which for those who are confused by that, Orem is a town in Utah, and if you type in my name and you never typed in my name before, it'll autocorrect to Orem. And we got to get to the point where I'm just so renowned that, in fact, if you type in Orem, it autocorrects to Prem.
To Pram.
To Prem, exactly.
The Prem.
So, Orem, Utah, no offense to whoever lives there, but I'm coming for you, baby.
If you lived in Europe, specifically in some of the more some of the where the English accents is, I don't know exactly where I'm thinking. I'm not very familiar with the certain areas, but you could go by Prum, because the E
Maybe
from
Maybe
Prum.
Yeah.
Eastern European or something. I don't know.
no, it's somewhere on the island.
In the UK,
Yeah.
which, and as we know, is not Europe anymore. But
I mean, isn't it still Europe, but it's not the UN? Or am I
No,
just-
they
no,
live in
no.
the continent.
Brexit was not about the UN.
Brexit
That
was a
would be-
geographical thing.
It was not about the UN. That no one would have cared, or at least as much as they did for leaving the European Union.
Oh, the EU. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got it. Yeah, no, I'm pretty ignorant towards the powers in Europe.
The powers that be.
I did hear that
Anyway.
now that the UK is not part of the EU, that Ireland might come back together.
Who might come back together?
Ireland?
Ireland.
Yeah.
I thought you said Ellen. I was like, what does Ellen have to do with any
Ellen
of this?
DeGeneres might come back together.
And when did Ellen separate? And from who?
Herself. So
European
there's
Union.
Northern Ellen.
The European Union, sorry.
Yeah.
Northern Ellen and Southern Ellen.
Yeah.
There was the troubles, there was the whole thing. They had the big famine.
Yeah.
Anywho, speaking of famines and Ireland and Ellen,
Speaking of famines, how many potatoes does it take to kill an Irish guy?
0. I got it. All right.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just it.
Woof.
Oof. All right. Well, I know there's a range of things we'd like to talk about as usual. One thing that I messaged you two a couple days ago, or 3 or 4 days ago, was this random like TikTok video I saw, and TikTok is, you can think of it what you will. I like it because I find a lot of good recipes on there. I feel like I'd like to think I'm on like Gain Talk, like all the fit fam, like you sleep, I grind, TikTok. I'm out there getting those high protein recipes, those anabolic ice creams, etc. But there was one TikTok I came across that was, it's from at Anxiety Gang Official is the account name. So it's like one of them TikTok accounts that like, posts like random like scenes with like cool filters, and like they're very like lo-fi vibes, and like it's just like, random quotes. Like I'm looking at like their thing, and like there's like pain is temporary, or like these are just like the prompts, or like sometime I don't know, it's just a bunch of like Tumblr-esque kind of vibes. And one that I came across, I'll just play it right now, and then we can talk about it.
You ever ask a man how he's doing and he says,
"Oh shit, it's cutting out."
I'm here to tell you,
it's cutting out.
That man is not all right.
You want me to read it? I can just read it. I'll imitate the voice too. All right, here we go. I'll imitate the voice. All right, pretend there's like a dramatic guitar playing underneath me. All right, you're hitting it. You ever ask a man how he's doing and he says, I'm all right. I'm here to tell you that man is not all right. That man is battling demons that you cannot even possibly imagine. That man is struggling every single day to find a reason to keep going. And the reason we say we're all right is because as man, nobody really fucking cares what you're going through. So why even bother to say it? But you know what? I feel you, brother. Because, I'm all right too. And that's the climax. It's not like a bad message. Like, of course, like the superficial surface level thing is like, yes, like men, like all humans have struggles that people don't identify superficially, and men especially have ones, and they're socially conditioned to hide them, or to sort of put them aside and kind of just absorb them, and keep doing their manly duties. Whatever, sure. So like there was like 527,000 people that like liked the video, because in some form or way you could resonate with that basic message. The guitar is nice, the scene is lo-fi, etc. And this stuff like doesn't usually bother me. It's just like these things exist on the internet. Like it's not like it's anything new or out of the ordinary. But I think it was just worth talking about briefly. Like I looked at the comments just because there was like so many of them, so I was curious. And like a good chunk of the comments were like one of the most liked ones said, "To every woman out there, it'd be cool if y'all started caring." And then another one was like, let's see. Oh, another one that like almost sounded exactly the same. It was like, "To all the women out there, it'd be cool if you guys did listen and just didn't change the subject halfway through us talking our problems out." And then some of them are like, "Man, if only people understood." Like abstractly, like people, as if like it's like if most men ostensibly identify with this, I mean that's almost half the people like that you're referring to. Like it's just like it was either these abstract comments like, "Oh man, like no one gets it," or like every day's a battle, but just like no one understands. Like these sort of like blameless like truisms, and then like just random like guys blaming women for some reason. And it was just like it was frustrating because it's just like the reason that you as a man feel like you have to do so much to like hide your feelings or emotions, or like not cry because you get your one cry every few years and that's it, or like you know we're not allowed to cry, and we just my hands look like this so hers can look like this, like this. just all this like it's like the reason for all that is not like abstract or because no one gets it or because of women. It's because of men. Like the reason I mean, I forget like the exact quote that like people say, like whenever people start talking about like, oh, like men have it so much harder, or like it's not because of women or because of just like that's just how things are. It's because as men made conditions to make it that way, to make it so like expressing your emotions feels hard, or like connecting with your fellow human being feels like something you would never do. So it just annoys me that when like all like stuff like this circulates all the time on the internet, and then like a bunch of people resonate for good reason, but like they're not fully tapping their fingers on the vein of what's actually the cause of this. Like it's just like these abstract things like, yeah man, this sucks, like, and then like there was this like chain of comments of people like, oh yeah guys, like let's start this men's movement, like hashtag I'm all right too, and then it was just like thousands of people responding I'm all right too, and it's like you're so close.
You're so close.
Like you're so close.
Yeah.
But like you don't just have to say I'm all right too and then close your phone and then continue behaving as you probably normally behave. Yeah. Which is to say that whenever like one of your guys says anything remotely emotional, you change the subject or like make them feel as if they shouldn't have never have brought that up in the first place.
Yeah.
So I mean that's just a conversation starter. There's so many things to talk about, or like memories you could think back to like in high school or something or whatever, but I just thought that was worth bringing up just because like that stuff always circulates the internet all the time. And it's just worth, I guess, kind of pinpointing that there's a reason so many people identify with it, like for good reason, but we need to fully get to the root of what we can do with it, and not just like the video and then move on.
I think like, I mean, why not let's jump into the like toxic masculinity and like what that idea is about and what it stems from, and like combating it, I guess. Because when I think of like toxic masculinity, what I think of basically is like the value system that has been created and perpetuated by the like male agenda of all of history that is dominating. Through domination is like where you find peace and glory. That like to be the most like perfect exemplar of what is great about a man, you like dominate your feelings, you dominate the world around you, you are all encompassing dominating king of all of life, and that any sort of vulnerability is weakness. Does that resonate pretty well with how you guys feel about toxic masculinity? Do you have anything to add?
I would say just sort of like the male agenda throughout history, like that's a good part of it, and like sort of a good place that like modern problems with it would stem from.
Right.
I can agree with that.
And so like that doesn't just like stop with men. Like the toxic masculinity being it as the primary value system also has like, if a woman wants to compete, then she has to take upon masculinity and become a dominatrix and start like fucking shit up, instead of she cannot like be vulnerable and be successful. Either she allows herself to be dominated, or if she wants to compete and have any sort of value in the male system, she has to become a dominator herself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's good to like tease out that masculinity or toxic masculinity isn't just like the whole like, oh, like straight white male thing. It's like it's a mindset of power. Like, which is to say, like, sometimes people like take this like too far, too just like reductive to like when they say like, oh man, like America is the way it is because of masculinity and nothing else. Like in the sense that like if you understand toxic masculinity to mean more than just the word masculinity, but rather just like a means of or a method, a framework of acquiring power, of putting your boot on other people to get what you think you want, then you can understand it in so far as like gay people can be toxically masculine. Like you don't have to be straight to be toxically masculine. Like as you said, women can be toxically can or feel that they need to acquire those kinds of traits. It relates to obviously like race and politics naturally, like in the way like countries or races of people behave, but which is to say that it's not restricted to the word masculinity insofar as it's just a recipe or part of a broader like attitude people or like countries can take on.
Right.
But that was just an aside because I feel like sometimes people either misuse toxic masculinity to like if they're like these like just very like basic liberal like writers that are like, wow, like they just like say anything is toxically masculine, but like don't explain it at all. Like they just say it because it sounds like a woke truism kind of thing. But then there's also some people that like take that and say like, yeah, like like people just say anything's toxically masculine. Like no, like many things are, but like you just need to understand like it's relation to things.
What is compelling about it?
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's also good, Swat, to just kind of, as you said, like it's just a part of a historical, it's been around.
Yeah. And it's like a system of values.
Yeah. And of course it's like inextricably tied to religion naturally and the development of
religion, politics, morality, material ideologies, I guess.
Which of course is why it's so hard to like either identify it generally or escape it also.
Right.
Because we're all products of it in one way or another, either products of it insofar as like we take on some of those traits, even if we don't think we do, or it hurts us. And for most of us, it does both. Like we both carry the traits and it hurts us, which is, I guess, the point of the video.
Right.
But it doesn't talk about that. It's just like,
it's just
man, like
right.
people don't get how hard it is to be a man without like, it's not like the whole men's rights thing. It's like it's a more like acceptable, like swallowable version of it. Like, brother, like you and I have it hard. And at the end of the day, we're all right. And you're all right too. Like, all right, sweet. Great. I
just wish all women weren't just awful at listening to men. The world would be so much better and I wouldn't have anxiety anymore.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Anxiety Gang Official, for your compelling content.
Yeah, so like Trev, you go first.
No, you go. This is probably going to be a different path.
Yeah, on the note of like recognizing toxic masculinity and like seeing how it functions in your life, how you adopt it and how it hurts you. Where do you guys in your life like see it? Where do you feel it? I can go first because I got one. Oh, if you're ready.
No, if you want to give an example first of show your question a little bit.
So my life here right now, I'm living at like a spiritual retreat center, right? Out in the middle of Northwest Minnesota. And I'm not employed at the moment. And it took me, I like moved up here, wasn't planning on doing any work, wasn't planning on anything really, was just going to like, the work that I was going to do was internal spiritual work, studying, practicing various different cognitive functionalities, I guess. And it was like 2 weeks living here where my mom sent me a job, like a janitor job. And I was like, oh, well, it wouldn't be bad to just like start working somewhere and like get some money so I can stay, I can feel secure and stay afloat. And I talked to Dan, who owns the place. After it was a really quick process getting the job, I basically called them. They were like, hey, come in for an interview. And I went in for the interview and they're like, you start tomorrow. And like at the end of the first week I talked to Dan, he was like, dude, I thought you were doing something different. Like, I thought you were actually going to like hang out. Like, you having a job wasn't really a part of the equation when we set all this thing up. And of course it's like rampaging COVID at this time. Like, it's just like if you wanted to work, like that's totally fine. But I thought like you were going to be out there and that was going to be your gig and you weren't going to have any like outside stuff. And I realized that that was true. But the reason why I took the job so quickly was because I was so uncomfortable with the idea of not working, of not hustling. And I felt scared for the first like couple months of like what's gonna happen if I'm not hustling. What's happened? What happened? And so kind of like what we were talking about the last couple times with like work ethic and like grind or die sort of stuff. The toxic masculinity that I've come into contact with the most recently is that sort of like, if you're not being productive to society, then you're killing yourself and you're worthless.
Yeah, it's definitely a good example. I can see that one. I'd say the place where I noticed it, I think there's something that like every guy is going to have, some of these traits in them that they can't be abolished. You just work towards, having a healthy relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I see it. I definitely don't have any places in my life where I feel like any sort of toxic masculinity is like, like I've never like putting anybody down or like making them feel uncomfortable, which I think is good because I think that's where you see it come out sometimes. But I would say in like in relationships, in the case of like jealousy, like nobody likes to think about their partner's previous partners, things like that. And that's something where like I have to meditate on that quite a bit because like I'll start to feel thoughts coming into my head that I don't have very good control over. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I know that I can get a handle on these thoughts just fine. I just need a little bit of time to actually work at it. So, and this is going to be getting off the question a little bit, but while I'm on this topic, so I think, all right, like I can see these thoughts, they're not the best, I can work, push them to the side, realize that these are male thoughts, like things that I'm never going to get rid of. They're always going to be there, but I can get a really good handle on them. So a lot of like what could possibly turn into anger or turn into, like unchecked jealousy, things like that, I don't let it get to that point. To play a devil's advocate on, what is really a good progressive movement towards being like, hey, don't be toxically masculine. I do wonder though, if to some point, like let's say I get in a relationship with someone who I don't want it to get to the point where I can't trust my gut. Like if I'm actually being wronged in some way, or like I won't be able to like spot out injustice and do something about it. If I'm thinking, no, these thoughts are just toxically masculine, like I'm better than that, I can get over it. If that's going to put blinders on to injustice that could be happening in my life. So that's one example, I guess, of a place where I see it come up. And also, but one of my anxieties about trying to, limit it as much as possible.
What like instincts or like emotions do you think are like related to like spotting things that are going wrong that are like also related to like masculinity? Like where do you think like those could be like overlapped? Like could those not also be just things you could think without like can't those two be separated?
I would say ideally they probably could. And like, yeah, spotting if something is going wrong doesn't have to be a toxic thing to do at all.
Right. Yeah.
But just something about, I guess it's me going through the mindset that like, wanting to take people, assuming their best intentions, things like that, like just like not being like abrasive or like quick to judge, things like that. In that process, I'm going to be thinking like whatever thoughts are coming into my head are probably just like evolution, where it's brought us today. It doesn't work in society anymore, and I got to get a handle on that. And so that's where I think it could get crossed up and they're entangled and tricky to separate.
Sure. I guess some of those like feelings of like suspicion or like frustration or like worry are also just like regular human emotions. Like I don't necessarily think like are like some versions of them surely are like perversions, so to speak, are like like tainted with like toxic or masculine sort of like vibes. And some versions of them are just like explicitly like toxic, but like some of those are just, like people who like aren't toxically masculine also feel suspicious about things and like worried about like if someone in their life like has feelings for someone else or like has jealousies. So I think those can be separated, like I think and I think like your approach to just like generally trying to have better relationships with your feelings is something that we all, whether we think or know we're toxically masculine or not, is like a good recipe, because I think at the end of the day, either way, you'll be sort of like mediating and doing like a damage control for your own emotions, whether or not like they stem from like toxic sources or not. And of course, like maybe sometimes your suspicions about things might be right, but like you'll kind of know those. Like I feel like there won't be instances where like because you like were less suspicious about like like an interpersonal thing, that like the outcome would be any worse than like if you weren't suspicious, insofar as like if the outcome is the same either way, like it's better to have like a controlled emotion. And then because also if you like control or like sort of like get a grapple on those like feelings and emotions, I think you'll probably be able to determine whether the suspicion is warranted or not.
Right.
Because it's like the way you laid it out, it's kind of like if you control your suspicions or jealousies, you might not always act upon them, which I don't know is necessarily true. Like if anything, you would just act upon the ones that through time and like questioning and judgment would be borne out. You know what I mean? So I think in the case that like, let's say for some reason, suspicion and jealousy and things like that, like were for some reason like inherently wrapped up with masculinity and toxicity, your like laid out description of trying to like, you know, grapple with those would be okay, because you'd be able to act upon sort of good judgment, and good sort of both deference to the person you're talking to, but also, you know, with thought with your own emotions. And if they're not entangled, well, then either way it's still okay, because then we're operating on the assumption that these are just human emotions that all of us feel to different extents, and we all, as you do, should be trying to grapple and think about them and sort of reflect upon them, and then upon good judgment act upon them if you think there's something there. So I guess all that is to say that I don't think it's a problem. The problem you pose maybe just isn't a problem at all, if you follow the equation that you actually laid out of just thinking and reflecting and as Swat said earlier, thinking about your thoughts, feeling about your feelings, and then acting upon them if it seems like you should.
Yeah. This also brought something up where, like, in my relationship, I've been with my partner for like 4.5 years now, right? And you know, there have been plenty of times throughout the relationship we've been distanced for the whole time. Like the closest we've been to like living together is an 1.5-hour drive. We spent a year where it was 4.5 hours one way, and for most of the time it's been an 1.5 hour one way. And so the entire time that we've been together, there's been the fact of not being together for long periods of time. And usually about once a year, especially around this time where it's spring and college is like wrapping up and things are getting crazy, we wouldn't see each other for like a month or a month and a half or maybe even longer. And those were really good times for me to unravel my relationship to like jealousy, fear, shame, all these sorts of like the like emasculation of imagining your partner with another person. And I realized, especially with my work, I think Prem, you brought this up, that like it might not be, well, in my experience it's not, but it's not exclusively like a masculine relationship thing, but a larger part of life, where I noticed as I was doing contemplative work and I was becoming more accepting of the world around me and what being less controlling and dominating over the world around me, the more I was open and accepting of my relationship with Hannah, to the point now where there isn't something that I can imagine that would cause me any sort of strain on our relationship, in terms of if she did, let's say she had a sexual relationship with another man. That in my mind doesn't hurt. It doesn't, I'm not accepting of that idea or that fact. And I've noticed with our relationship that the more open I am to it, the more vulnerable I can be with it. And the more vulnerable I am with it, the more of a space that it is welcoming for Hannah to be in and she wants to be in. And conversely, when you watch, especially like movies and TV shows where the writer is writing about an experience that they had of an affair, there is the shame, guilt, and jealousy creates a space that is not welcoming to the partner, which pushes the partner away so that the shame and jealousy is the factor that creates the situation where the biggest fear that causes those shame and guilt to happen. And it's through the shame and guilt that that other partner is pushed away to have an affair. And so, I mean, to work with like relationship and like intimate relationship and jealousy, I mean, how I've gone about it is very not masculine. It's very not objective. Like, Hannah is not mine to be mine, and so on and so forth. I'm curious, Trev, if you have any questions about that or what you are thinking through that.
No, I think that idea is a huge mastery over it, you know, like your biology. Right. Because when I say that, like, the things I have to really check myself on that I'm worried I would just do, like, to no end, you know, even if it's not right. I think like feelings of possessiveness are probably the trickiest, or not the trickiest, but the ones that I like seek to destroy first, you know, like with the most prejudice is like possessiveness. Because, you know, way back, you would get married and the woman you married was your property, right? Like that's the historical, like just male dynamic.
Husband, and so husband means like business caretaker of the house, like they take care of all the property of the house, and wife is the business of the husband.
Yeah. And so you think about that, you know, it's like, all right, well, clearly that happened, you know, through some like biology that people just let rip and took advantage of. So then thoughts that come into my head, like my first question is, am I being possessive? Mm-hmm. Because, you know, there's a difference between like cherishing your partner and feeling possessive that they're yours to control in any way. So I think that, yeah, if you've like really come around to that feeling that, you know, like she's not yours, you know, like you're creating that like space for openness and discussion by just letting it go. Mm-hmm. That's huge.
Right.
Yeah, because I think that's a really good point too, because I feel like, I mean, especially like going back to like movies and TV shows, one of like the underlying sort of like things that you'll notice when like an actor, like someone is like facing like attention with their partner, is like they can't understand the idea that like their partner would maybe want something different, or like their partner isn't happy with how things are at the moment, or like their partner just is thinking something that is divergent from what their partner should be thinking. Because like there's, even when you don't think it's there's this underlying like possession, like that not only are like, is this person mine, but like this person either like is here to like please me, or like, you know, be with me, be alongside me.
This relationship should be a specific way.
This is my relationship.
Yeah, this is what I want.
But it takes two to sail a relationship, lest it gets stuck in the Suez Canal.
Yeah, I mean, I would even
lock up 12% of global trade.
I would say even on the other side of that, like if you go through it takes two to like relinquish your individuality so much into the relationship that you on the other side, it does just take one. And that is if you can be so unconditional with your love, literally like there is no condition where this love is broken. If you can get to that point, then really it just takes one. And all you have to do is like let the love radiate, baby.
Yeah. And I feel like that to get to that point is, as Trevor said, just mastery. But also I feel like the outcome will either be, I think either way, it'll like once you get approaching that point, the outcome will be abundantly clear to you, because as you said, it leaves things so open,
right,
that either it will be reciprocated or maybe the other person just isn't comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But I think because of that sort of mastery, the outcome seems more likely to be a positive one.
Right.
Because it's a good first ingredient.
Mm-hmm.
So the outcomes will probably be a good thing, you know?
But it's like, it's love if you're together or you're not. It's love if your partner loves you back or not. It's love if your partner, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to your point, Prem, usually when you get to that point, the other person in the relationship has no choice but to love you back. And be really excited about the relationship. I mean, it's insane. I think to go against toxic masculinity, Trev, you mentioned like getting control over these sort of invasive thoughts that are toxic. And I mentioned in my my sort of pseudo quasi definition of toxic masculinity that it comes from a value system based on domination, and that one of the toxic masculine traits is a domination of self, a domination of feeling. So I'm just curious, I want you to have an opportunity to like maybe rectify what you said in like getting control over your feelings.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it is sort of fighting fire with fire.
Okay. I was just thinking, like, did you mean something like adjacent to control? Like, is control just the word that you use because that's simple and easy enough to use, but you mean something more complex, or were you thinking control?
I'd say, well, okay. So moment to moment, I'm trying to develop control, but that's through more so understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like from like the first episode where it's like you just gotta change your relationship with the material world and what it is that you want. So in the same way, changing your relationship with your thoughts that are, you know, these aren't something you have to like really like read and find out about to have these thoughts. Like they're from your brainstem, you know, like, so it's something that a relationship must be present for sure. So it's making that relationship, it's understanding those feelings. So yeah, definitely moment to moment, I'm looking for control, but it's not like I need to take these feelings and I need to like, you know, put them in a headlock.
Fuck them up, man.
You know, that is, that's interesting. That actually is a good segue to something else that I'll put on the sidebar for now. So just remind me that I put something on the sidebar.
You write it down,
but
baby.
You got your.
Thank you. But you know, one thing that I think throughout all of these conversations that there's, and it's interesting because I think you two kind of embody them in certain ways, and I think these are not binary things. Like they kind of ebb and flow, just like many of these things do. There's like, you know, nuance to them, but there's one concept or one overall stratagem of kind of like being comfortable relinquishing yourself from sort of embedded social cultural attitudes that, you know, we're trained to hold. Just completely trying what you can to relinquish yourself from them, and, you know, not be attached to things generally, and kind of just, you know, meditate, mediate, and kind of formulate yourself in whatever way you can. And then there's this other aspect that I think, Trevor, you really embody, which is a more sort of direct confrontation with all of these embedded things, and then facing them and then trying to sort of rein them in and sort of reconstructing through reining rather than relinquishing than reconstructing. So they're both, forms of trying to modulate yourself and see yourself beyond like your immediate lens.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both reflective, but they both are kind of different approaches that I don't think the outcomes are necessarily drastically different all the time, but they're different. Those are different approaches. And again, I don't think those are binary. Like I think those kind of like slip into each other in certain ways. But I think that's been interesting that throughout all of this, whether we've been talking about like, political, cultural attitudes of like, like what you pick up like with like the people you're surrounded by, or like, like your race or sex, or like things like masculinity, or, whatever. This has always been kind of a thing that's sort of like come through in each discussion is these different approaches of trying to formulate and your clay figure of yourself, your voodoo doll, so I think that was just worth bringing up.
Yeah, that's a good observation for sure. I mean, that's the beauty of having friends and having times that you can sit and talk with them, because like, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's say that you got two people that want to learn about birds as much as they can. And I'm going to say this first one's going to be SWAT and the second one's me, because it's the image that popped in my head. So the first person just goes out into the wilderness and just watches birds all day, just writes down, they're here these months. This is where they like to stay. This is how many numbers they're like found in. Here's what time in the morning they start to sing, and they find out all these things about birds that way. And the second one finds a dead bird and dissects it and looks in there and be like, all right, this is how its digestive system works. This is how its lungs work. This is how dense its bones are. You've got two very different baskets of knowledge about birds, but still through a lot of effort. The surgeon has no idea how it interacts socially, like how it likes to catch its food. Maybe looking at its beak would help. And then the bird watcher has no idea how the bird's organs work, everything like that. But then they can write each other a book and go, here, I've spent all this time watching birds. I want you to have like here's like what I found out. It's easy for you. You don't have to spend years watching birds. It's like, oh, you don't have to have your like be knuckle deep in a robin. I have all the information for you right here. So yeah, it is totally different. I don't think that either one is necessarily better or worse, but we are going to arrive differently, to what it is that we're looking for, whether it's from tinkering or if it's just from observing.
Right. And especially one of the ways that we can, witness this, a little bit is like, look at Trevor's muscles, man. And you can't really see it on here, but I'm a little flabby.
fluffy as Gabriel Iglesias, fluffy.
Oh my God, back in the day. But yeah, that's a really good metaphor for sure. I really enjoy that.
That was a very quick metaphor. I will say, very off the cuff.
Prem, there's a message for you. Someone named Pills in Ibiza says, "Yo, Prem, I've seen you on a TV show before."
What?
Is that on Twitch?
Yeah.
Is that on Twitch?
Yeah.
TV show.
Yeah, maybe you're famous.
As far as I know, I don't think I've been on any, but
maybe a TV show happened in Orem.
Yeah. Well, if it's Pills in Ibiza.
Yeah.
You could be getting him confused with a really handsome actor, like the guy from Ex Machina.
Right. This also could just be like a friend like trolling us. Regardless, excellent name. And if this is actually an earnest comment, thank you for recognizing me in all of my discography. Sometimes people, forget to, celebrate the extras in the back. So I'm glad my fans are here. If it's just a friend, shout out to derailing us for a moment. That was a pretty good comment, I would say. Like pretty like harmless, but like kind of, funny, silly.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of friend comment we need, where it's just like, There's no harm to it, but it's just like, whoa, here we are. Now we're talking about something completely different.
Yeah.
So either way, thank you, Pills and Abizan. Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
Unless you guys wanted to pick back up right where we were, then definitely do it. But I would say SWAT posed the question, where do you see toxic masculinity in your life? And we were going down the line. We just didn't get to. I wanted to see if cycling back there gave you an opportunity to crack something open.
Yeah, go Prem.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Well, this actually, yeah. So this was actually related to my sidebar. So this is great.
Hey, don't forget you have something on the sidebar.
Thank you.
Hey, Prem, earlier you told us to remind you that you had something on the sidebar.
Oh, thank goodness. Let me just open up the sidebar and see what's on it. So, one thing that I feel like I've witnessed, throughout college, but also especially middle school and high school is, and both for myself, but especially peers around me, is how damaging toxic masculinity is on, trying to take on issues surrounding mental health. And I think I wrote kind of about this in one of my newsletters for the new year, but one thing that really kind of gets me,
shout out to Better World.
Shout out to Better World. Subscribe, folks. One thing that really kind of would get me, and sometimes things I would participate like just sort of robotically, is like the whole like hashtag, like Bell Let's Talk, for example. I think that's one that is pretty big in our region of the country. I think it's like a Canadian like company that started it, so I guess that's why. But it's like I forget which month, it's like whenever it might be related to Mental Health Awareness Month, I can't remember, but it's like this company that like donates 5 cents per like share to like mental health. No, it's like Bell Insurance or something like that. And no offense, insurance company, like it's whatever, it's a benevolent thing, but like this like just idea that like we can solve mental health through like hashtags and donating 5 cents to these abstract notions of mental health awareness. And like the phrase mental health awareness in general is just so broad and abstract. It's like, what are we being aware of? Who's becoming aware? What does the awareness mean? Thank you, drums. And I think that is often like the limits or boundaries of like mental health engagement for a decent amount of folks, is just like a share of a post and like, you matter, like I'm also aware of mental health and you should be too, is just like frustrating. And like I think of often how peers around me, like guys, would like, if we ever were to talk about like mental health issues or like struggles that we or others might face, it's always like very much in like, you were talking about earlier, like putting it in a headlock. Like, we kind of joked about that, but that's how like people talk about it. It's like, I'm going to beat this thing. Like, I'm going to make this thing my bitch. Like, I'm going to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and like, punch the glass of the mirror and like, go take on the day, like depression is I'm going to eat it for breakfast, and it's just like, it's just like it's doing the same thing. Like, again, like, because oftentimes, especially certain mental health issues are because of like masculine sort of features of society, of like, whether it's the whole like thing about like endlessly working or like feeling like you have to be a certain way or behave a certain way or look a certain way. Like all these expectations that you're trying to manage about yourself. And these visions about what you should look like in the mirror, that you then choose to try to confront those issues within yourself with a masculine response of like, I'm gonna make this thing my bitch. It's just like sad. It's not even like, oh, like I hate this, because of course that's kind of a masculine response too, to like be like angry about it. It's more just like sad and like makes me feel very just hollow that like so many of us, and I mean myself included perhaps in the past, like contribute to this, response in a certain way of just like, that is the boundaries of how you can confront issues surrounding, depression, bipolar, anything that, mental health already has its own set of stigmas that are, often related to masculinity, but this sort of like, just perpetuates it, that like, even all these people that say like, beat the stigma, like, like mental health, it's okay to have mental health problems, but like the response is either so superficial of just sharing a hashtag, or it's like explicitly masculine that like, it just makes the stigma stronger insofar as it like disguises it as something else. It cloaks it with like this idea that you're beating the stigma, but in fact, you're just like making it so these mental health issues are ones that, will not be confronted properly.
I see another pendulum here.
Here we go. It's back, folks.
Well, right. The one side
back and better than ever before
is the stoic denial of any mental sort of problems, and the other side of the pendulum is a outward expression of the like sort of mental options, but to actually engage with your like the solution to your not solution. God, it's so complex. So if I say something stupid, obviously just call me stupid. I don't care. I'm dumb a lot. But like to like I don't want to say fix, but
to try addressing
to address to address your like issues that
demons.
You're going through, your anxieties, your frustrations. To address this stuff, you're not going to be able to do it on the pendulum. That is, you're not going to be able to do it by denying it, and you're also not going to be able to do it by tweeting about it. You have to move off the pendulum, baby, to engage. Pendulums, man.
And I will make a note that like especially over this past year of like like Instagram activism and like like sharing all these posts online, like I think two things can be true. One is that like we will not fix the world through like sharing posts online, like through posting, and that like there still of course is an element of value to it in engaging with broad swaths of networks of people. But it's just like if the message is just a hashtag, and that it's nothing that like kind of like conveys as much as you can through a screen some semblance of a human connection or emotion that you're sharing with someone, or a figment of knowledge that you feel that is something worth reflecting on with your peers, well then of course it's you there's no movement there. So just an addendum there that like I think the Instagram infographic complex sucks, but also we can still understand how like social media or like the online world can play some sort of role in like conveying something with your peers if you so choose to try to take advantage of that and not just like robotically share things and say like that's enough activism for the day, or like that's enough like engaging with I
did my part.
Fellow friends. Because also like if it's not accompanied with like actually talking to people, then like there's no connection there, because like it can both be true that like it's a little less meaningless to make distinctions between the online world and the real world at this point in time, because what makes the online world not real? Like we exist on it just as much as we exist here.
Well, here we are.
Right, precisely. So this is an example of a more like meaningful exercise of what we have at our fingertips, I suppose. But anyways, addendum aside, pendulum. Yeah, I mean, I guess if we call this pendulum like the status quo / masculine response to mental health issues, it probably you need to maybe slide off this one, folks. Which I guess, I mean, it's not like in prior pendulum equations sometimes felt a bit more abstract or like hard to like pinpoint what it means to like escape the pendulum. But this one, I think is pretty clear insofar as it's just like not facing or confronting your anxieties, frustrations, fears with just the masculine response that perpetuates this in the first place. But like,
Right.
as you know, just feeling. I think this one especially is one where you gotta really lean in, relinquishing yourself approach.
Yeah.
I think like once you relinquish yourself, you can sort of like, reflect and mediate and reconstruct. But like to get out of this headspace that like you have to either put your head down or look in the mirror and just like aggressively like Hulk smash depression. You gotta realize that like that's just not how you're gonna take this on. Like,
right. And you're not gonna. It's also not gonna change if you deny it and
right.
sweep it under a rug.
Yeah. Totally. And not only is it bad for you or like degrading for your own sense of like humanity and grounding to the world, but also for the people around you that are watching and are influenced. And this is where the whole cloud of it all comes in, of masculinity, is that we're all watching each other and we're all influenced by each other, even if we think we're like better than this or whatever. Like humans respond to patterns. And if all we see around ourselves is people behaving a certain way, even if we don't think it's right, we'll still be, waddled with self-doubt and another layer of anxiety of whether we're doing things wrong. So it's both selfish in a good way to try to escape this pendulum of masculinity, and also it's humanitarian. Like, you want to talk about being a superhero and saving other people and being the good guy at the end of the day, then quit being a man.
Yeah.
Then you'll be Superman. Then you'll be able to wear the cape and feel the love and the warmth of a good life, because you won't be just bleakly absorbed by the depressing and just degrading features of trying to be a man all the time. And people around you will be thankful to you for it.
Yeah. This, I think, segues really well into theories on how to engage with masculinity in a way to change your relationship with it. And I will posit my theory and my experience has been through vulnerability. In the terms of through contemplative practice and opening of myself, am now welcoming of on the topic of like mental health, right? I am now welcoming to myself when I feel lonely. I am now welcoming to my sadness. I'm welcoming to my frustration. I'm welcoming to my feelings of alienation. Those feelings come and I accept them and allow them to exist in me, and they take their part. I don't know if we talked about the emotional train last time. I think we did. Where like the front train is like this one emotion, and then emotions are never singular anti-biased things. They have different feelings that come with them. Like anger has guilt that comes behind it, and that guilt is shameful, and that comes behind it, so on and so forth. And so when like loneliness comes in, and I can accept it, and I can be with myself who's lonely and care for myself and be vulnerable and feel lonely instead of pushing it away and fighting against it, the like my mental digestive system has enough probiotics that like I keep regular, if that makes sense. Like my depressing poops are always nice, brown, and toothpaste like. They're not too hard or too soft. It's just right.
This digestive metaphor is insane.
It's so weird. It's so abstract too.
I mean, if it goes down well, it'll come.
Right.
I maybe should have interjected earlier. Before no, not before the poop metaphor. That definitely had to happen.
That's pretty crappy of you.
Hey, no, okay, because we're getting to the point where we're gonna start discussing what you can do to address your issues you might have with your own masculinity, and we're also gonna in that way that I want to talk about where you started with that TikTok, right, and like the comments that were like just sort of like missing the mark. It's like, what do we actually do? And so before we get there, which by the way, kudos to us, this is probably the most linear conversation that we've had.
Yeah, this is crazy.
So right away when you guys were discussing, or we were discussing the comments, and like one thing that came to mind right away, because I'm thinking, all right, so like, what does this look like if you go out in the world and you try to use, like, let's say 500,000 people watch this video, 3,000 of them in the comments are like, hashtag I'm all right.
Right.
2, whatever. And then we built some sort of momentum. Right away, it seems like you'd go out there, then you'd see someone being vulnerable, trying to address and put their feelings and anxieties out in the open. And then after this momentum has been built, people would be like, hey, I see you, come in, like, and be cool about it and be like what they're looking for, the whole point of that video. That seems like how it should happen if everyone's now suddenly aware of it. But right away, I was thinking about, you've all heard of the 5 monkeys experiment.
No.
It's become like
I'm
a
familiar
fable
with like multiple
at this point.
experiments with a monkey.
So in this experiment,
multiple experiments, you need to catch us up.
Is this the one where they write Shakespeare?
No.
That was one of the ones I was thinking of.
So in this one, there's a room with 5 monkeys.
Is this the prostitution one?
No.
What? Just let
that is a crazy one too, though. And there's like a bundle of bananas at the top of a ladder, and the floor is
lava,
like electrified. And so they're all milling around, and it's cool. Or no, they just hose them down. That's right. Maybe it's not electrified. Maybe it's both. All right. So one monkey goes.
Wait.
Listen, I'll get there. One monkey goes up the ladder and he grabs the banana, but when he does, the people outside the experiment just hose down the other monkeys with ice cold water.
What the?
So like the other monkeys are pissed. They're like, what the hell? And so the next time the monkey goes up to grab a banana, all the other ones get hosed down with ice cold water. And so eventually, if a monkey goes and starts climbing the ladder, the other monkeys rip him off and beat the shit out of him. So then they take one monkey out and they put a new monkey in.
No.
And the new monkey goes to climb the ladder. He gets pulled off and pummeled. They, replaced another one. And then that monkey goes up and, same thing until they've all been replaced. Now there's 5 monkeys that are just beating the shit out of anyone that climbs the ladder, but none of them know why.
Oh my God. I need a nap.
So
that necessary for an experiment?
I mean, it
exhibits it perfectly.
Yeah.
Right. So it is pretty intuitive.
Everyone in their heart of hearts is like, yeah, I wish we could be open about this. And they're like, I know that if I was vulnerable, I would just get reamed by all the men in the world. And I don't want that to happen. I wish it wasn't like that. But you are going to, like, your reaction when you see, like, male vulnerability right away is going to be, like, disdain and disgust. And, like, that's not how men should act. And we are all just the last 5 monkeys.
That is, kudos to you for remembering that experiment. I absolutely hate
that experiment.
It's another reminder that humans are some of the worst creatures sometimes.
I feel like even if that experiment didn't take place, like that sort of idea of like conditioning people to act a certain way and then slowly assimilating new cultures, you don't need to experiment on that. That's intuitive. We know that's already
We didn't need to.
We didn't need to fuck up monkeys with ice cold water, asshole.
Yeah. They just had to make it. That's why I said it's pretty much become a fable at this point, or like
Yikes!
Just anything like the donkey and the lion skin. Like, yeah, you probably didn't have to, but
just
yeah, because none of the monkeys are gonna ask like, "Hey, why
are we doing this?"
Yeah, and so that's really what we have to go for, because yeah, like you want to say that hashtag's gonna work, everyone's gonna see it out in the world and be like, not anymore, like everything's fine now. But even the people that want it most aren't gonna let it happen. Prem, just like you were saying, you're like, if you're looking at the lens of like if you're looking at it through the lens of masculinity, then you're just gonna swing in circles all day and nothing's gonna get fixed or not addressed.
Yeah, right. Just the poisons of academia sometimes. That SWAT, you're right. Like this has probably been exhibited or proven, like just through like, if not just like, you know, theory and stuff, which, you know, sometimes is enough, of course, but like maybe like a less harmful experiment. Like we are obsessed with making animals just like, oh my gosh.
Well, we have to know. And then we have to know that we know. Okay?
Yes.
So we know that we know. And then we have to know that someone else knows that we know that we know. And if we know that someone else knows that we know, then we can truly know what it is to be right.
But then the kicker is that it stays in a psych textbook.
Yes.
And then maybe makes its way to a podcast Twitch stream with 3 guys and less listeners than hosts. If you're lucky.
Dude, the ratios here suck.
Bro. Dude.
Where all the chicks at, dude?
Yeah.
This podcast is bad.
But God, that sucks. But no, yes. I mean, that you're right. That is a sort of issue at hand is how do we go about this now? Like, of course, we were getting into, you know, potential practical things that we can take on, but like, it's a philosophical thing that, yes, like we're all in this milieu that we were born into and that we soak up the behaviors of. But it's, I was just gonna say, it's interesting that like one thing that is a sort of masculine thing, and I think this is something that like embodies a lot of cultural, social, political discussions, is a very tension that humans seem to take on, which is both this sort of belief in humanity and the potential for humans to accomplish many beautiful things, and then a secondary, and sometimes this is dangerous because it gets almost like human exceptionalist, which of course isn't always necessarily a good thing, but you know, the idea that humans can do good and accomplish. And then the other side, which is that humans have certain limits or things that we just can't do. You know, we're just a part of a system that's just society, bro. That's just how it is.
Can I digress us real hard? You guys can fuck me off whenever you feel ready. But I was having this reflection earlier, and you reminded me of it perfectly, about like the symbiotic relationships of like natural life, and how like, I mean, if you look into like wilderness therapy or like nature mystics, even just like parks in cities where people go, a common thread that you hear from people is that they feel naturally connected with nature, and it feels good being with a tree and being with grass. That like the parasitic relationship that human beings have towards everything, like we are capable of, we create our symbiotic relationships. We are smart enough, we have the capability to choose what our relationships are with the animal kingdom, with the plant kingdom, with the fungal kingdom, with each other. We are developed enough that we get the choice. We don't have to be parasites if we don't want to, and we don't have to like, we don't have to do anything. All of our symbiotic relationships are by design, and we have the option and ability to design beneficial symbiotic relationships with everything, but we don't, because we suck. We fucking suck. Sorry. All right.
Yes. No, thank you for that digression, because I think it still is not a digression at all, because it actually melds actually very well, because I laid out that relationship, either like you believe humans can do good and do things, and as you say, have the choice to create our relationships with the world around us, or that we don't. We don't have a choice. We're just existing within it. This is just how things are, which is, a binary for a lot of things in general. But in this way, this is one example. And I mean, even with the example of like the animals and like the monkeys, for example, like on one hand, we see ourselves as puppeteers of the animals around us, and we can make them do things, but also that if monkeys behave this way, therefore we as humans also behave this way. Like, we cannot fathom the idea that we can formulate our own relationships with our fellow humans to not be the five monkeys, because, well, the monkeys are doing it. Of course, we made them do it by like putting them in a certain experimental condition such that we punish them every time they behave a certain way.
When some dude already wrote a 5-page abstract with their hypothesis that exactly what happened would happen, because we already knew it. We didn't need the experience.
Yes. Again, we didn't need to do it. But that sort of belies the idea, the notion that humans can be good and humans can do things. Which is not to say that monkeys are inherently stupid or dumber, but like there's this idea that there's a human condition that we hold, that we can, if we can both understand that monkeys do this and that humans can have the propensity to do it, then that means humans ought to have the ability and acknowledgement to know that we don't have to have the propensity to do that thing. And perhaps if we can then understand that, okay, even in this experimental conditions where monkeys were responding to a certain stimuli, i.e. being hosed, and we take that into human context and say there's a stimuli of like masculinity and like fellow men like behaving a certain way. Well, we as agents, as men ourselves, can take the stimuli away first. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's hard to do the whole like, oh, it only takes one, like flash mob kind of approach to things. But in a political or cultural or social discussion, if the two options that many people are having this, and the two options are either, like there's all these systems at play and we're the five monkeys, or the other option, of course, like these are binary. Of course, that isn't the case. But like in this instance, if that's one option, the other option is, well, we can try. If everyone having the conversation chooses to try, that's thousands or millions of people that are choosing to try, who are also surrounded by thousands and millions of other. So when we think of at least the most immediate, simple, easy task of how to escape the pendulum, of how to not be the five monkeys, is to first start with the people in your immediate circle. Because as much as we want the broad, easy, just large changes in things, of course, that's not how things work. And if you can get a room of five monkeys that behave a certain way, you can start with your own room of five monkeys that behave another way. And especially.
Wait, so we're not supposed to change the world all by ourselves?
But that's exactly it.
Why would I be the change I want to see in the world if there's so many people that aren't going to act that way? Fuck it. There's no chance. There's no hope that everyone's going to act that way.
I'm not manly enough to all make them act the way I want them to.
Excellent. But like that really is the thing. With many of these, the answer is not sexy. The answer is you become a part of what you want. I saw this great.
It's as sexy as you really want it to be.
It honestly, yeah, it really is, boys. There's one thing I just saved today, in fact, from the Sunrise Movement, which is like the big youth-led movement advocating for the Green New Deal, and they posted something today, and it's this quote. It's love has never been a popular movement. The world is held together. Really, it is held together by the love and the passion of very few people. Of course, you can despair. Otherwise, of course, you can despair. Walk down the street of any city, any afternoon, and look around you. What you've got to remember is what you're looking at is also you. everyone you're looking at is also you. You could be that person. You could be that monster. You could be that cop. So this was in, context of like, policing and injustice and things like that. And you have to decide in yourself not to be. At the end of the day, when we're thinking of our own personal relations to things, because
I would like it to go one step farther and say that you are that person. You are that thing. You are that monster. You are that cop.
Yeah. Instead of you could.
Yeah. Like,
I guess
if you were dealt a different hand, you would be that way.
But yeah, and I buy that. Yeah. I just think it's all to say that in all of these conversations that many people have, whether it's in a podcast or with their friends or whatever, or at the Thanksgiving table, you have to identify that the patterns that are around you are a result of you. Mm-hmm. And if it all starts at, especially in the way America specifically is constructed, with so many disparate, different sized communities, some towns with 10 people, some towns with 10 million people. Mm-hmm. And people being from multiple contexts. I'm in New York City now, but I'm from North Dakota. That you are a part of these patterns, and to take any step, whether that's even just calling a friend, a fellow male friend, and asking them how they're doing, and saying no, really, instead of saying I'm all right too, brother, that is a step. Because to give someone that comfort or knowledge that they can be that comfortable is to then give their peers that comfort, is to give their friends that you don't even know the potential comfort. Because it truly could be, not could be, it all is a chain, a link. We all are linked in some capacity to one another. And whether we choose to take advantage of that chain or to let that chain remain useless is up to us. Or useless insofar as it just upholds all the sucky things instead of potentially upholding less sucky things.
Oh, baby. That was some good shit. Trev, do you have something?
I think just saying that, like, you are part of these patterns and what's going on. Like, as we do episode after episode, that's probably one thing that I'll probably come back to quite a bit. Saying be the change that you want to see in the world is sort of like the cliched version of it, but it's absolutely undeniably true. Just like this divine democracy by which the billions of people on this earth, like, that's how we're going to create our society. And it seems like you can't do anything to change it, but it's just like those tiny little changes, one person at a time. It's hard to say it without sounding, like one person at a time, like, right, we can do it, like, totally. Just like super overused. But yeah, absolutely.
That is the de-alienating force that counteracts our ego alienation.
And this also, one of my, this booklet is like 30 pages long. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It's something I read every like 6 months. And basically it's just like 4-page reflections, like a bunch of them, some poems. And the idea is that your circumstances, it's like sort of anti-stoic. So it could be circumstances are going to happen to you. You can't control them, but you can control how you react to them. What this book says is that every person's circumstances are a direct result of their thinking. Mm-hmm. Like, like sort of the law of attraction, like positive thinking begets beneficial circumstances, whereas like toxic thinking, just anything that goes in your mind, that's going to create the circumstances of your entire life. Right. And so I think that's sort of where I see it, that like you're a part of these patterns that you see in the world. Like you create them. As much as it seems like they happen to you, like you're the architect in your relationships and, anything like that, the attitudes of the people around you.
And I also think it's worth mentioning that oftentimes it's the reason we get kind of caught. Well, yeah, but also, yeah, no, you go first. What? You go first.
Oh, I was just like, one of the things that really frustrated me when I was into like self-help stuff was like how a writer or a thinker would get fixated on one idea that resonated, and that one idea would become all encompassing. And then another thinker would have another idea, and that idea was like all encompassing. They like resonated, and they went with it and went. And that is what makes it $1 billion industry, is because there's these little snippets that like resonate, and then it's blown out of proportion. But like if you read one self-help book, it's about like this one matrix of your life, just one. And then you read another self-help book, and it's life-changing, because what it does is it looks at a different matrix, but like they're not taking in the whole entire like fucking matrix, because it's probably too fucking hard. I mean, like, try to talk about how all these things interrelate, but like when something like Stoicism comes up, you know, what is compelling about it, as it being like you like basically like the compelling parts of everything come from something resonating with your experience, and that there are things that resonate with your experience that exist on the opposite sides of various dichotomies, such as you don't have control over anything. And since you don't have control over anything, your thoughts are not your thoughts. They come from a sort of impersonal thing that exists within this matrix of all these other things. But also, it is just as true, if not more true, that you control your thoughts, and the way that you think about things, it changes the experience of the world around you. And both of those are compelling, and both of those are true, and both of those are experienced.
Yeah,
it's fucking crazy. Yeah. I had this thought earlier. I don't remember what I was doing. I think I was like in the kitchen talking. I live here alone, and I spend a lot of time here alone. And I like teach myself all the time. Like I'll when I talk to myself as teacher and student. I like, that's just how I conceptualize the way that I talk to myself. So it's always in the form of a teaching. And this specific time, I was like, I'm such a fucking idiot, and I have this imaginary audience that's listening to me be this like great teacher or whatever. And then I was like, thank you, audience, for like sitting with me while I babble on about nonsense, and you're forced to listen to me. And then I was like, the sanity ship has sailed, and it is not returning. Thank you. Have a good night. And I busted out laughing, because I truly did feel absolutely insane. But I think the sanity ship has sailed is something that if you'd need a way to especially get me back on track, that's probably a good little phrase. Like, dude, find your sanity ship. It's gone.
Well, I mean, I think your last point was totally true. Like,
oh yeah,
in the same way that many things can be true once, is that you can both be a part of patterns and also be within patterns, insofar as your thoughts can both influence everything and also influence nothing, because you are being
right.
Which, I mean, we've talked a bit about my qualms with self-help books before, and I think that's a topic for another day. I think one final point that I wanted to bring up is that with all of these,
or just final with this.
Well, I mean, up to you, but final for me on this is with a lot of these conversations about, you know, things like masculinity or politics or like the way we see each other as human beings, is like, even if you start to get constructive with someone, one final thing that you kind of run up against is, well, still at the end of the day, like, you know, we're just people. Like, we can only do so much. Like, what's the point? Like, yeah, like, I guess you're right, but like, I just don't see how I can impact things. Is that people, and I think this gets into the exceptionalist thing that we have, an individualist tendency we have, is the the insistence that unless we change the world, our actions are not worth pursuing with any means. Unless we leave some sort of impact, it's not worth pursuing, which of course isn't always true, because it's a problem, because for one, many of us believe it, like in these sort of philosophical or like difficult conversations, but that's not how we live our lives generally. And we do things for the betterment of ourselves, our families, our communities all the time. But when it comes to these tough questions that we are implicated within, such as things regarding race or masculinity or justice or politics or whatever, all of a sudden it's all or nothing, because that's just the easiest way to remove yourself from being guilty about being involved in something. And what we need to understand is that just because you're not going to change the world about something does not mean it's not worth pursuing, because we do that all the time. And secondly, even if conceivably we could change the world, but you just don't know it, or you might not be around for it, that's okay too. Like, striving for good, even if you're not going to be part of the good outcome, is a worthy virtue in itself. That's the most beautiful parts about being a human, is that you're existing not only in this world, but you're a feature of the world in its entire time, whatever that timeline is.
Right.
And of course, it's hard to derive meaning in that, because so like literally in the space, but you need to engage with that in a way such that you're not just a human right now in 2020, but you're a part of a broader story of humanity. And just because you don't know whether what you personally do will have an impact on, that doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing, because that just is so bleak and a depressing prescription of you as you in your humanity and yourself and your existence. And again, is also not how we live our day-to-day lives. And I know personally it's hard to go for the all approach and the all or nothing equation that we find ourselves in with these issues that we are implicated in. But that's the point, because it's easier to put your hands up and say, at the end of the day, what can I do? Instead of saying, I have a part in this.
Right.
And because we all do, it is your duly, morally, humanly obligated responsibility to accept that you do have a part in this and to do your part, because you have the part, so take it. You were casted by humanity to this part that you didn't audition for, but now you have it.
Regardless if you accept it or not, right?
Yes, precisely.
Like you are already doing it.
You have it either way. Yes. So your choice is really to not do it, but you still have it, or to do it because you do it, or because you have it.
Yeah. There's a really good Bible quote. I don't know. It's from one of the prophets who's talking about the people being shepherds, and that like the flock is being disregarded by these shepherds. And kind of the gist of it is that sort of like, you are already a shepherd, whether you accepted that responsibility or not. You're either doing a good job in caring for your flock, or you are exploiting people and you're like hurting the weak and the vulnerable. Like that's the dichotomy that you're living in, regardless if you accepted the task of being a shepherd. What a good one. Trev, do you have anything to wrap up on that?
No, it's honestly something that I might put down to like, that would be a jump on a conversation that I think we could start the night on a different time. But no, well said from both of you on that. But yeah, I'm nothing I want to dig into right now.
I have a little expression that I want to hear your guys' thoughts on. I don't know if I'm crazy or if I've made it well enough yet, but kind of, or if it's relatable. It's kind of what I'm getting at, is like, especially because I am alone and I don't talk to people very often. I don't know exactly how how much of my inner musings are applicable and resonate with a wider audience. But the idea that I think what it seems to people, it's hard because this is abstracted, that the institutions and systems such as government, religion, and let's just stick with government and religion and other systems like that, that those systems came out of a necessity because of the human alienating force of the ego to counteract the innate alienation that we give by creating competition and tribal attitudes. And so like things like religion have come to give a grounded meaning to an alienated people, and things like government come to mystify people into not slaughtering each other when there's a conflict, and that these are necessary institutions and systems because they counteract this natural human sort of attitude. Do you guys resonate with that? I have another thing after. I just need a yes or no. Like, does that seem like it would fit other people's definition?
I think that is the right formulation in general, that like it's how like these two things in particular are how people over time learned to try to live with each other, to live in a society. I'm not sure, like, if you just ask someone off the cuff, like, what do you think government and religion is, that they would like fully lay it out that way. But yeah, if you said that to other people, they would say, yeah, I guess that.
Okay, here's the idea that I was reflecting on, that these sort of institutions and systems are actually alienating forces and are destructive to our ability to connect. And it is really through the sheer desperation and love of the human nature that human nature is actually an intuitive connectedness between people. That it's through that human nature of connectedness that these systems and institutions are able to continue on, because there is a intuitive sense of connectedness. And if that wasn't there, these institutions would implode, because the institutions aren't actually capable of de-alienating people. The only people that are capable of de-alienating are the people themselves with each other. Does that make sense?
So you're saying the only reason that any of these, regardless of what system of government or what method of religion, the only reason that they've existed as long as they have is not because of them, but because the humans whose natures were already there allowed them to exist, essentially. Like, regardless of what kind of system of government?
Yeah, kind of. It's more like, it's just like, is the turning it on its head compelling enough to look into?
I think it's worth looking into. I mean, because first off, I mean, a premise of all these questions is that which system of government is most complementary to human nature? Which one reflects human nature, or which one tames human nature?
Right.
So your question is interesting insofar as it flips the entire premise over, as in, like, those questions aren't the right question. It's rather, I mean, I don't know what the fundamental question would be if the underlying sort of operating claim we'd be going off of is that, like, it doesn't matter necessarily what system of government is at play insofar as, or as long as, this spirit of interconnectedness is allowed to thrive to a certain extent. And then perhaps the question is, which one allows it to thrive the most? Or which one is constructed by the spirit thriving the most?
Yeah.
Because that would actually be the real question, is if you're flipping it completely over, then it would be, okay, just put people in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And make sure that the only ground rule is, okay, folks, we want to stay as connected as possible. And then just see which government would happen. I guess that would be maybe the complete perversion of the question, because otherwise that's usually the question, like which one is complementary, which one is best for human nature, which one maybe like tames the bad stuff that humans do, which of course is another assumption that those questions are operating on, that humans do bad things naturally. And also like distinctions between human nature and then nature. Like what is nature and what's that related to human nature? Like what makes human nature human nature? So I mean, this is, I feel like, a massive bag of worms that is, you know, an entire like philosophy course's curriculum. I think, to answer the most immediate question, I think your thought or question seems like worth pursuing in a certain way.
Okay.
Or at least like being analog or like adjacent to like these other questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I would at least say that. I don't think I can answer right now,
well,
because like I said, this would take like a reflection, like a lot of different thinkers and authors, and like what we think about those thoughts.
Yeah, basically I was looking for if there was an easy way to shoot it down that I wasn't seeing. Like if
I think what I said doesn't necessarily shoot it down, but perhaps like just that, like, to find the answer to that would be to, as we said, like one question of that, maybe that would come out, that would be like, yeah, like if you allowed people to fully embrace interconnectedness, what would they build?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, you know, a version of those questions. It's different, but it's a different version. But that's just my immediate thought.
Trev, do you have any intrigue?
Not really. I mean, I guess, yeah, that's just an interesting sort of thing to tease out with like a lot of different like criteria. It's like thinking about what humans need or what they want and how it led to them building religion or government, and then based on that, see which ones are most in line with those values. Like that'd just be an interesting way to like dissect it from either end, either look at each religion or government in that way, you know, or style of religion or government, or look at each human value that way based on how they've been reflected in religion or styles of government.
Yeah, and I think with the way that I have written it down and have constructed it, really like the most zany sort of out there conclusion is the kind of like anarchistic, like any sort of institution is a vessel for oppressing natural human connectedness. And which is like, to me, a little bit compelling, but like also the opposite, the authoritarian side of like a governmental system is the extension of a people's power, and for a people to be able to function healthily and steadily, they need to be able to exert their power and fend for themselves in a way of like the state can be a vessel of breaking the chains of oppression. And that's also just as compelling as the state being a vessel for oppression. And so,
which I think is why sometimes, curiously, the lines between anarchism, socialism, communism, and liberty are much more fluid than between Democrats and Republicans, like traditional lowercase liberal people, like who operate under like the liberal framework of like Republican democracy that America is, like, which is why, like, you know, when you think of like third party politicians, like they oftentimes get like random swath of people who vote for them, because like those lines are much more fluid and like can be seen as compelling to a lot of different people. But yeah, these, I mean, we could pick at all these questions individually with like different authors or different specific questions throughout these next few weeks or months or years. But is there anything else that perhaps you guys wanted to bring up throughout this conversation generally?
There's this little thing. I've said the word compelling a bunch because I have been reflecting on what's compelling. And I mentioned this a little bit. And this is another theory. If you guys could be my sounding board.
That's what we're here for.
My reflection was that what makes something compelling is its ability to resonate with an experience. And if something doesn't have an experiential basis, then it will fall flat. Okay. And so, talking about shallow versus deep arguments, a shallow argument can be very compelling, and a deep argument can be very compelling, and a shallow argument can be not compelling at all, and a deep argument can be not compelling at all. And for me, I found a pattern that what I consider to be shallow arguments are arguments that are themselves alienating, that they remove humanity from the equation. Let's say for just like a very simple example, like bad stuff happens because there are bad people in the world. And because bad people exist, like the bad people are then alienated, and you are alienated from the bad people. There's that separation and tear there. And so,
but that could be a compelling argument. Like that can still be compelling.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And then a deep argument is one that moves towards reintegrating humanity into a alienated population, such as try
to deepen this one to keep it like sort of
just abstracted from any specific thing. People, I've like bad people can't exist. I mean, that's just a belief at that point, but like it is apparent that when people are desperate, that is when they take actions that are against a human connectedness. That out of desperation, people will sacrifice what they can to accomplish a certain need, a certain standard of safety, whatever it may be. And so any sort of concept of badness actually comes out of a desperate situation. And that desperate situation can be like there is someone who has lost so much hope in the world that it's become meaningless, and in their nihilism, they do an action that's seen as bad. But for that person, it's meaningless. It cannot be bad. And so to stop that person from doing bad things, you would need to reintegrate meaning in some way to their life. Or to stop badness from happening, you'd need to relieve desperation.
And that deep observation or argument could be not compelling for people. Right. Yeah. I think that's an interesting formulation. Just the deep versus shallow. Of like whether it like integrates you within the problem or like within the common connection or not. But I was interested because I feel like you were particularly interested with whether something is compelling or not compelling.
I think that might be trickier to pin down because the way that you described it was like the deep argument and the shallow argument, they're poles, they're black and white. Either they're based on alienation,
right,
or they're based on integration and connectedness. Whereas I feel like you're not going to find that coin for, and obviously, it's probably not like that. You're more likely to find arguments that are somewhere in the middle. But when it comes to compelling arguments, well, now you have like debate class, speech, anything like that. You've got all these strategies and things that are going to go into making it compelling, and it's going to be from 0 to 100. Somewhere on there you could grade it. So that necessarily will be a spectrum, and you can't say this is what makes it compelling versus not compelling.
Right. So I started with like, what is compelling is something that resonates with experience.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because like the compulsion scale is based off experience, and then the depth scale of shallow versus deep is based off of integration versus like alienation. And of course those are very related. Of course, like if you are experiencing humanity, for example, and connectedness, or whether you're not experiencing things.
Yeah.
So continue. That was just continue with your original thought. I was just making sure I was understanding like the vocabulary. I wanted to lay that out in my own brain.
The alienating and reintegrating sides of shallow versus depth, I don't know if that's like a hill I'll necessarily die on, but that is what I have found to be a pattern in my life of what I've noticed. Every time I think of an argument that's like really shallow, I always come into the idea that like, oh, this argument isn't taking into account, it's not trusting the party that it's arguing against. Like
sure.
Okay. Oh, this artist, I don't like this thing because this artist isn't smart enough for it. They're doing something that they think is like interesting, but I don't think it's interesting. And so you're like alienating that creator instead of like taking the art into account.
Sure.
Or reintegrating the person into the art.
Sure.
And accepting that they are experiencing something and trying at least to convey anything.
Yeah. Okay. So that formulation makes sense, and I'm gonna think about that next time I'm looking at arguments on Twitter. But so then this compulsion question, Trevor's kind of getting into it, that there's like the spectrum of sort of validity of or compellingness of an argument. And I think, like just off the cuff, I think of just like if you're like listening to someone argue something, and like if you're just kind of letting it wash over you, you might feel compelled just because of things like, like confidence and things like that, like sort of like personal like expression.
Or you like the person.
Yeah, or you like the person. Versus like if you're like maybe fully like geared in and you're kind of like just analyzing the words. So there's kind of just like the physical human aspect of it. Right. But what was going through your mind, Swat, as you were thinking about, like, I think you put this in the Discord, like what makes an argument compelling or not? Right. Like
how well it connects with, resonates with your experience.
Right. Like you said, experience. Yeah. So like what was there a sort of prompt to this? Like I think it's true insofar as like if you take out like the maybe like not necessarily arguments, but rather beliefs,
right?
Like what you choose to believe and not to believe, like regardless of whether you're like judging someone's debate, but like just like what you choose to believe. Maybe that's a better like mode of like thinking about this, because like you kind of remove that like personal aspect. I'd say that probably like true. Like it's harder to believe things that like you can only know in the abstract, whereas like if you witness or feel it in a certain way, not necessarily like if it's your experience, but if you can find a means of whether like it's your fellow human being that's experiencing it and you see it or whatever, those different modes of empathy.
Yeah.
I think of like, the different organizers I've talked to for like stories, for example, like whether they're organizing for like workers' rights or like better pay, climate justice, things like that. Like one thing that all of them will always say is, regardless of how much you might get people fired up about something, there's no substitution for experience, as in for getting someone alongside you, like organizing or making a union or going to the protest, being on the picket line. So that's one thing that's, always kind of stuck with me from, a range of interviews, is that you can't substitute experience as an ingredient for really holding a belief about something. Because oftentimes too, like some people's beliefs, even if they believe one thing, the reason they believe that other thing isn't based off of like a lot of people's beliefs isn't based off of experience either.
Mm-hmm.
Like as in like when you believe something, even the reason you do believe something can also be abstract.
Yeah.
Which is why actually like a lot of people's beliefs are actually quite fluid, like more than we give them credit for.
Right.
And if we treated people as more dynamic and more evolving, you know, we'd probably get somewhere more easier than how we do now, where we think sort of static beings that can only believe certain things because that's how they always will be.
Yeah, and actually I think that point right there was what prompted the thought. Kind of was this idea that like anti-maskers are crazy, or like Trump voters are crazy. Like they are just like, it's inconceivable to support Trump. It's inconceivable to not understand science and all these sorts of things. And understanding that argument, especially used against someone who is a Trump supporter or does feel that wearing a mask is unnecessary, that argument isn't compelling at all because it has no experiential basis for them. And you're taking out their humanity by disregarding them as crazy or insane.
Which is, I will interject to say that there are two conclusions that can come out of that belief. One is because this happens for the past 4 years in politics, or whatever, however many years, 5 years.
50,000.
Where like, many years, but particularly the past 5 years where it's like, oh, like, you know, like not all Trump voters are bad, like, you know, or so-and-so, like, and then like the first conclusion is, so like we should, you know, meet them halfway. Like we should, you know, get to understand them. Like we should, you know, like placate them essentially, like treat them as if they're like kings, which is not the correct conclusion. No. All this is to say is that they are also human beings just as much as you're a human being.
Right.
And which means they are malleable just as you are malleable. And, you know, Ben Shapiro and that crowd always like idolizes the battleground of ideas, but never actually, you know, engages in it. But earnestly, like this is a means for you to engage with someone as a fellow human being and communicate, cooperate, and try to reach a common conclusion, not through moderation, but through talking, through being a human, not being a robot and treating people like statistics. These are living, breathing people with hearts and brains just like you. And you don't have to moderate them or moderate and like kind of meet them halfway and like do what the New York Times did. Oh, swap frozen. Oh, no, you're not frozen. Do what the New York Times did and do like a million stories, like going to some mystical diner in Wisconsin and like meeting the Trump voter as if they're like aliens. They're also human beings, but that also means you don't treat them as like different species or as gods, because they have just as much a responsibility to meet you and to understand where you're coming from. And the best way to do that is through experience, talking with them, not about or at.
Does that resonate with you at all, Trev?
Yeah, 100%.
Right. Are you guys feeling...
I just wanted to... sorry. I was just going to say, I just want to make that clear that, like, what you're saying is true.
Yeah.
But just that there's two different distinct conclusions, and oftentimes the establishment, like, press and media and everyone takes it to be, oh, yeah, so we should, you know, like, you know, half the country thinks Trump is good, half of the country thinks Trump is bad, so we should, you know, Trump is kind of good and kind of bad. No. He can, like, you can believe he's bad, and you can just convince other people that he's bad. You don't have to, but that requires talking and engaging with and seeing people as dynamic,
not alienating them.
Yes.
I mean, that you mentioned that people are malleable, but people don't want to recognize that, because to recognize that people aren't rigid is to take responsibility for the fact that you have the power to put in the effort to change their point of view, and people don't want that responsibility. It's way more convenient to be like, they're rigid and their beliefs are locked in. They're always going to be an evil person.
And also that your beliefs can change.
Yes.
That what you believe now might not be what you believe. Both those things are uncomfortable. You totally nailed it.
Pumped.
Again, it's the implication that you have a part.
I'm so pumped.
You are
I'm gonna.
a shepherd.
You're an agent in your interactions and your relationships.
Yeah.
Yes.
Versus just a pissy bystander.
Yes. We're all a part of the patterns. We're all sheep and we're all shepherds. And it's okay to be sheep and it's okay to be shepherds. Because we are.
Yeah. Do you guys feel good about wrapping it up there?
I think I was like, when you started switching, I was like, oh man, this is a very important conversation, but like this is just a whole nother thing. But here we are.
I think we solved it.
Like wrapping up the bow. That was pretty darn good.
That'd be a strong finish.
Yeah. I have a closing thing.
Say it.
Close
Two
it.
songs that came to mind during our discussion. If you want some listening material to help internalize our discussion here, is in terms of toxic masculinity and the idea of possession, the song "Ill with Wanting" by the Avett Brothers. And in terms of interconnectedness, the song "We Are All Beads on the Same String" by Saint Seneca.
Right.
And I think, like Trev, you mentioned that like you bring up song lyrics, especially when you're formulating questions. These like poetic lyricism like stand out as ways to conceptualize your questions. I think I resonate with that, in that songs come to my mind as we're talking. I'll be like, oh, that reminds me of that one song. Oh, that reminds me of that one song. And I think I'm just going to write them down and say them at the end.
Yeah, I'm with that. I've had like afternoons before this, so I'm like, I think this song, I should like plug it. I think it's been like, so yeah, that's, I'm definitely with that. I'll check. I haven't heard of the titles.
Dope. Well, see you at Mike's.
See you at Mike's.
See you at Mike's, baby.
See you at Mike's. I gotta pee.